Welcome, everybody, to the Hot Tag Hooligans Wrestling Podcast show with myself, Ehren. Tonight, Tom, unfortunately, could not join us for this episode due to some shoot job obligations, but I do have a fantastic guest tonight. It's the one and only MJ Santana. How's it going?
It's going good. How are you?
Good, good. Now, we were kind of talking weather tonight around the United States is kind of disastrous. With tornado warnings. We can't figure out if it's spring, if it's summer, if it's winter. But you're down in Dallas. I'm in Kentucky. For us, it's a typical time of the year where it's 30 yesterday, it was 75 today, and then it looks like 48 tomorrow. Is that how Dallas kind of is as well?
That's definitely how it is right now. I mean, I work at a gym, so I work at about 4:30 a.m. So when I go to work, it is about 36 degrees, and then I get out of work at 11 a.m. and it's like 70 degrees, and I just have to wear like sweatpants over my shorts when I go to work and then shut them off. And then especially for wrestling events, some nights it's like 70 degrees, and then some nights it's like 20 degrees, and then especially if you're going all over Texas, so you just kind of have to deal with it as it goes on.
Now, you mentioned that you work in a gym at 4:30 in the morning. Do you find that there's a lot of clientele within the gym? Are there a lot of people who love to come in when no one else is there? Because I know around
Oh, of
here
course.
it's kind of hit and
Yeah.
miss.
Oh yeah, no, there is a solid group of people that every single morning I can count on them to be in the gym, and they will. So I get there at 4:30 and the crowd gets there at 4:45, and they wait until 5 a.m. for me to open the doors, and they are very, very loyal.
Yeah, I guess if you're getting off work, maybe you work the night shift and you're kind of getting off work. Listen, I'm not that dedicated to get in the gym at no 4:30 in the morning. I don't care. I've been to places where people go down to the hotel gyms and they start working out there too. And I'm like, no, I'm on vacation. I'm not trying to
Yeah,
work out.
yep.
Are you that person? Do you try to hit the gym as much as possible?
It definitely depends. For me, I travel a lot for wrestling. Um and I have a free membership at Gold Gym because I that's where I work. So I'm able to go to the gym wherever, even when I'm in a different city, just because there are Gold Gyms all over Texas. But that being said, if I'm on vacation, I want to be on vacation. So I will not be the only like exercise I'll be getting is from swimming or walking around sightseeing. I'm not trying to like get a workout in.
You mentioned that you're down in Dallas, and at this time of year, especially this year, Dallas is where it's at. WrestleMania is down in Dallas this year, and show after show after show is also, going on. So it's a great opportunity for talent like yourself to get noticed, to meet the right type of people. Is that something that you're kind of planning on doing through WrestleMania weekend? Going out and going to as many shows as possible, or are you kind of grounded and you got a really tight schedule?
So right now I'm booked, almost every weekend, every month until May or through May until June. And so I have a pretty tight schedule right now. But that being said, whenever I can, I travel with the other people in my promotion to the shows that they're on just to start meeting new people and getting new connections. And I've gotten a couple bookings that way. So I definitely try to go out whenever I can to like different promotions just to see. But right now I am pretty locked in almost every weekend.
Now, are you somebody who do you feel like that you learn more by sitting and watching, or are you somebody who learns more by actually getting out and doing? Because I know I've spoken with a lot of talent through the podcast, and they talk about, it wasn't until they went to a certain show that they learned a certain aspect that they were kind of missing in their own career. Do you find yourself a student of the game as far as, going to a show and picking up some new material and kind of implementing it to your character, or is it just through hands on?
Yeah, no, I definitely gain, I think exposure for me is my biggest teacher because I, loved wrestling as a kid, but I definitely only was exposed to like WWE. So going around like these new indie promotions, as well as like watching AEW every week, like it is exposing me to so many different types of wrestling, and definitely seeing is my best teacher, because if something looks cool, I'm going to want to try and replicate it.
Yeah, and for me, I grew up on WWE, WCW, ECW, and then there would be a few small independent wrestling promotions that would come through the territory area, and I'd be able to watch them every once in a while. But I never knew so many people were unaware of independent wrestling until we started this podcast. Because when we told people we were starting our pro wrestling podcast, they were like, "Oh, are you getting Stone Cold Steve Austin on? Oh, are you getting Becky Lynch on?" And I'm like, "No, we're trying to get the up and coming talent. We want to get more exposure to talent that people may have not heard of yet." And they were like, "What are these promotions?" So were you someone who knew about independent wrestling, or were you strictly a WWE type person?
Absolutely not. I did not know about independent wrestling at all until almost college, really. Until I met my boyfriend Shimbashi, because he had always wanted to be a wrestler. I had just wrestled, amateur wrestling throughout college. And then when I met him, I was like, okay, so you're trying to be a wrestler. Does that mean you're going to go straight to WWE? Like, what does that mean? And he was like, no, 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 I'm going to be with the, Lions Pride Sports, and I practice every week and stuff like that. And I was like, what? Like, I just didn't know that it was such a big network of wrestling around the country. And I was completely ignorant to it.
In Texas, I mentioned, is a hotbed for independent wrestling right now. And there's a lot of amazing female talent. And, I love the Midwest talent that we have up here, the Billy Starkses, the Haley Jays, but Texas is doing it right now. I mean, it really is, with yourself, Mia Friday, Mission Pro, Thunder Roses waving the banner all over the place as far as bringing awareness to female wrestling. So what is it like living in Texas, being a female wrestler right now?
I can't lie, it's pretty good. I feel like we are, like you said, like we are rising to the top pretty fast. Danny B just made her debut on AEW Dark, and she was on a Lions Pride show a couple of weeks ago. It's so like inspiring to see people that I've seen on shows and have been on shows with, that are getting these huge opportunities just because the women's wrestling in Texas is so robust right now.
Yeah, I feel like the women in Texas are getting more notoriety than the men in Texas. Do you feel that way as well?
That you could definitely argue that. I just think, coming from a women's wrestler, I'm gonna have a little bit of a bias. I love women's wrestling, obviously, but and I can see why it is getting like a little bit more of a closer eye, and people are wanting to kind of put their time and effort into it more, just because it's kind of a new concept, and when something's new, everyone's going to kind of flock to it just because it's the new thing. But I mean, it's not to say that the men's wrestlers in Texas aren't amazing. They are also like getting so good, and just so good so fast. I feel like a lot of people in Texas are rising to like the ranks of AEW and WWE like really fast, just because of the wrestling culture in Texas, and that definitely has to do with both men and women.
When you look at your career right now, I feel like you and Mia Friday, and let's talk about it. It's been a hell of a rivalry so far between you two. Outside of the ring, let's talk about you two together. Do you feel like that you're learning a lot from each other as you're kind of growing within this business? Because I feel like within the next 2 to 3 years, and maybe sooner, some of those opportunities are going to start opening up for you at some of these bigger companies. So talk about that camaraderie between you and Mia and that rivalry.
So the rivalry in the ring is bitter. We are going back and forth. We just had a big 2 out of 3 falls match at Fight to Unite with the United Way at Lions Pride Sports, and we definitely battle it out in the ring. But outside of the ring, she teaches me so much. She's only 16 years old, but she's been doing this since she was 13. She just has so much more experience than I do at this point, and She teaches me something new almost every time we get in the ring together. Her ability to, work around the ring is so inspiring at such a young age, and it's really an honor working with her. And I just can't wait to have more matches with her in the future. And yeah, I think Mia was on a VWR show. I'm soon to be on a VWR show. I can't lie and say that the two aren't linked. I think when people see how good Mia is and then they see our matches, it might open up some doors for me. But that being said, I think Mia and I will keep learning from each other as we go on, especially being right now the only two women's wrestlers at Lions Pride Sports. But yeah,
let's talk about Lions Pride Sports, because that's a promotion right now that a lot of people probably in the U.S. are not quite aware of unless you're really down south, of course, Texas area. Because I'll be honest with you, until we had Mio on before, I didn't do my research and I had never heard of them. But you're right, you're starting bringing in people. I think Mark Henry was involved in some stuff here recently with you guys as well. So talk about Lions Pride Sports and what that means to you.
So Lions Pride Sports is run by Houston Carson, who is he is the epitome of wrestling. He eats, sleeps, breathes, talks, walks, everything wrestling. He's an amazing coach and an amazing mentor. And he really puts his heart and his soul into it. His wife, Kenzie Carson, is the co-owner of Lions Pride Sports, and she makes a lot of our gear. So it's kind of like a tag team between them two. He handles the wrestling, she handles the gear, and overall people really become stars at Lions Pride Wrestling. And then for Lions Pride, for me, really came into play with my boyfriend Shimbashi, because that's where he trained, and I didn't want to train at a different school. So instead of training in Dallas, which is where I live, I decided to drive all the way to College Station every week just to train at Lions Pride Sports, and it's the best decision I've ever made, simply because of the work that Houston and Kenzie do there.
Awesome. Now you mentioned Shibashi. So earlier on, you were a videographer, correct? Is that how you kind of got your foot into the door? And then, so what made you finally make the switch yourself? Because you mentioned he was already kind of involved in it, but it's very rare that someone pulls their girlfriend or their boyfriend from the side and pulls them into the business as well. I know Facade and Danny Moe are another duo that were kind of like that. Danny Moe had no interest in pro wrestling, and Facade kind of pulled her into it. Now look how great of a career she's starting to have as well. So what made you finally decide to jump into the ring as well?
So I wrestled in high school. I did amateur wrestling my junior and senior year of high school, and I immediately fell in love with just wrestling and being on the mat and doing something as physical as that. And Josh also wrestled throughout high school. And we had, so it's really a funny story. So we had a mutual friend, and we connected through that mutual friend. We found out we were both wrestlers. We found out we both loved WWE. So we got to talking. He told me, hey, I'm going to start training in the fall at Lions Pride Sports. You should really do it. And I was like, no, absolutely not. I'm not doing that. I'm not driving all the way to College Station just for wrestling. And then as he progressed in the program and started getting on shows and started getting booked, I, went to a couple of his shows, and they were amazing. They were like at a quality that I was just not expecting. And I was starting to get like really jealous after shows. Like I was like angry at him and like really snippy with him, and he didn't know why and I didn't know why. And he was just like, what's your problem? And I'm like, I think I'm jealous. And he's like, well, why don't you just join? And so that basically just my jealousy of my boyfriend in the ring is what made me join wrestling.
Now, you mentioned your amateur career, and we've had a few talents on before, female, that have also been amateur wrestlers. But how hard was that for you? Because I know around here where I'm at, there's not a lot of amateur female wrestlers. But did you find that hard? Was there a lot of backlash against you, or was it pretty well open down in Texas?
So fortunately for me, wrestling, I grew up in Houston. So my high school in Houston was actually we had a bigger women's team than a men's team. So especially my senior year, our women's team was just huge compared to other women's teams. We still didn't have enough for a whole varsity and JV roster, but we had more than our men's team, which is unheard of in other high schools, in most other high schools, especially when it comes to wrestling. So I was very fortunate to, you know, have be able to be exposed to wrestling in a space where it was really encouraged for young women. Um, as I got to college, I was starting to realize that, wrestling was not as big of a sport as it was in my high school, even though it wasn't a huge sport in my high school either. Football was definitely still the biggest sport. But just talking to other people in college, it was just really eye-opening to see that not a lot of people knew that girls could wrestle at all. I would also get a lot of, "Oh, you wrestled? Like, did you wrestle guys?" And I'm like, "Well, not really, not ever." But they would also say things like, "Oh, you're too small to wrestle," because there's that stereotype where only like bigger women can wrestle. And I mean, it never gave me any problems. It was just kind of cool to be like, "No, I wrestle too," and they're like, "Oh, that's really cool." So
Now,
I never
how would
got
you
any.
consider how would you consider your wrestling career as an amateur? Would you consider yourself fairly well, or
So, because of the environment of wrestling at my high school, I was able to progress like pretty fast. So I only started wrestling my junior year, and by my senior year, I was an alternate for state. So I progressed really fast, and that was all due to just, I feel like, the culture of wrestling at my high school.
yeah, it's big here at my alma mater here in Kentucky. We won 11 out of the last 13 state championships. We're like the greatest
Wow.
wrestling program in all of Kentucky, Union County High School, and it is so amazing the dedication that amateur wrestlers have. I mean, I can drop my son off for football, and they are running up and down hills and packing each other up and down hills. And they travel around the U.S. sometimes. A lot of them do to get nationally ranked. And then, of course, you have to watch what you eat to make sure that you're weighing in correctly. And I don't know another sport right now that maybe someone can tell me another one, but I don't know another sport that's that dedication matters to the individual itself more than high school wrestling.
I'd have to completely agree. I feel like if wrestling taught me anything, it taught me discipline. Just because it wasn't like I would be able to go to practice every day and that's all I had to think about it. It was kind of a 24/7 sport. As soon as you wake up in the morning, you think, okay, I have to lose, 2 pounds before this next meet to be on weight. How am I going to do that? How am I going to do that in a week? And it leads to very questionable decisions, but at the same time, it's definitely, as far as it went. I would say the main thing wrestling in high school taught me was discipline.
What would you say to other young women and young students? Like my daughter, she's 10. What would you say to a young female who's interested in wrestling?
I would say, if you
Amateur
are
amateur
very
wrestling.
interested,
Yeah, amateur
yeah,
wrestling.
I would say if you are interested in getting into amateur wrestling, the main thing I would suggest you do is just pack on some muscle. Like, pack on as much muscle as possible, because you do not want to cut weight without having muscle to back it up, because it will make your life so much harder.
And has your amateur skills helped you make that transition to your actual pro wrestling training, like as far as taking bumps and making sure that your body's well taken care of?
Yeah, so the discipline definitely comes into play. You definitely have to be disciplined to do pro wrestling. At the same time, I'm able to get some of the more technical aspects a little bit easier, just because there was a lot of technicality in amateur wrestling that kind of transfers over to pro wrestling. As far as taking bumps, that was a huge, huge block for me, and it still I mean, it still kind of is, just because my philosophy in amateur wrestling was I don't want to hit the mat. I don't want to touch the mat at all, right? So having to take bumps and go to the mat, as often as I do in pro wrestling, it was just outside of my like previous thought process, and I really had to rewire my brain to work a different way.
Yeah, when you watch a fantastic match like a Shawn Michaels versus The Undertaker, and you watch how there's no flinching in their motions at all during a match, and it's just pure, it's amazing to watch. And I know people are like, it's so cool. You understand like how hard that is to not have that hiccup and to keep going and make it look smooth. And even if it was rough, we don't even realize it was rough because of how professional to the craft that they are. So when you're laying out a match or you're in the ring, are you finding it hard for yourself to implement certain aspects in the match because you're not comfortable with it quite yet, or are you finding the transition to be pretty smooth?
There when I'm going through a match, with whoever I'm doing the match with, it's kind of, I like to think of myself more as like a sponge than like a ring general. I try and, just see what they want to do, and then I'll fit myself into that. But when it comes to trying to replicate the masterful way that, like a Shawn Michaels or an Undertaker would do it, I just try to think of, okay, what am I doing? How would it affect me if it were, 100%, if it were, if someone punched me in the face, how would I react? So I just try to think of everything as an action reaction. I try to think of everything as, okay, this happened, now what? Now what's the next thing? What would be a logical train of events? And not just putting a bunch of random things together, if that makes sense.
Yeah. You mentioned that you're in college, and so are you recognized on college as a wrestler, or do most people not realize that you're even a wrestler?
So it's actually, no, not a lot of people realize that I'm a wrestler as well. Just because I'm my sorority Alpha Gamma Delta, I'm our chapter president right now. And so a lot of people just know me as a sorority girl. But that being said, all of my sorority knows I'm a wrestler, so they oftentimes support me, and they know to the full extent. They think it's really cool. But yeah, in the general college life, not a lot of people know.
And what are you majoring in?
Biomedical engineering.
Oh, okay, so break that
Yeah.
down. Break that down to me, because I would assume that perhaps that you were going to go into a field that could also benefit yourself into pro wrestling, because there's a lot of people do that, whether it be communications or journalism or television aspect of it. So tell me about that degree, because it sounds like to me that you've got a really good backup plan perhaps one day.
Yes, I do. Well, I mean, you have to consider that I joined a year ago, but I'm a junior in college, so I started my degree before I started wrestling. That being said, growing up, I was not really a sports person. I did sports all my life, but I was more of a book smart person. I never really like cared about sports as much until I really got into wrestling. But it was more of like a casual hobby. But like I always said, like school is my sport. Like that is my thing. And so growing up, I just really, really loved engineering, and I loved. I wanted to, I wanted to be a doctor. I wanted to be an engineer. I wanted to be a lawyer. Like I wanted to do all of these big things. And finally, in high school, I settled on biomedical engineering, just because it kind of mixes together medical and engineering, and all of that goes into play. And you can do science, you can do math, you can do biomechanics, you can do thermodynamics, you can do all of these different things that to me are really interesting. And so I'm in college for biomedical engineering as a wrestler. That's also the president of a sorority. So I got all of these different things in my life going on right now that kind of don't mix, but it fulfills me.
It's perfect. I mean, AEW just had a women's champion for a long time that was a dentist. So
Yeah. Yep.
And it's good because let's be honest, and I hate this because we've had some guests on before and we've had this conversation. The rules for the women are not the same for the men. You can be a 50-year-old man and still have a world champion, be a world champion. But for some reason, the major companies are not giving the females the shake like that. Once they hit a certain age, it's like they're kind of done with them, and it's terrible. So what do you think the pro wrestling community and environment in general needs to do so we can stop that stigma?
I think it all just boils down to how you can control your own personal bias. So I can't say for even, you or anyone that I know, I can't say, how can you change yourself? I can only say, how can I change the way I look at wrestling? So sometimes, so you hear these terms like male gaze and the female gaze and all of these different like terminologies. But how I see it is, I see, Triple H and his long career, and his matches later in his career are still great, and he still looks great. And he's older, but you have to look at, Beth Phoenix. She looks amazing, So it's like you can't say on one hand that Triple H looks good and not acknowledge that Becky Phoenix also looks good. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, how can I recognize that in myself and change that? And I think it's up to every person to kind of do that, like while they're watching.
There are some positive steps that have been taken, because I would tell you 10 years ago, if someone like Becky Lynch had had a child, they probably never would have brought her back. And so there are small pieces that are changing, and they'll acknowledge it on TV, like, hey, I'm pregnant. Hey, I had a child. And then, they're able to come back and be right where they are. So we are taking those little small steps.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think it's amazing. I think, I think it's just a step closer to women being able to do and have the same opportunities no matter their family obligations, because a couple can say, oh, we're having a baby, but it's really just the woman having the baby. So it's only really her life that gets disrupted. So having Becky Lynch come back so soon after having a child shows that we're moving towards the family obligation of women being not so bad in terms of a professional career.
100%. Before I let you go, are you down for some rapid fire questions?
Yes, of course. Let's do it.
All right. Best movie of all time is what?
Oh Lord. Best movie of all time. That's so hard. I love movies. The first movie that came to mind is Mulan. Just because.
Are you talking about the animated version or the live action?
Yes, no, not the live action. Animated only. Great songs. Message slaps. That's all I can say.
I didn't think the live action was as bad. I thought it was fairly good.
I didn't even watch it solely because I heard that there were no songs in it. And let me tell you, the Mulan soundtrack, it is like the soundtrack to my life. So I just, for reasons, between me and Jesus himself, I cannot watch the live action movie.
Okay, I will tell you, there's a few like little instrumental things that are the music, and you're like, there it is, so don't give it a try. I'm kind of that way on a couple of them. I'm just like, I don't know about that as a live action, but most of the time Disney does do it kind of right. They come out on top pretty well.
Okay, I might give it a chance, maybe.
All right, we're cruising down the highway right now, me and you turn on the radio and you say, "This is my jam." What song is it?
Oh, this is another tough one. But I think it'd have to be right now. I'm in a very big Taylor Swift phase, have to be All Too Well, Taylor's version, the 10-minute version. It's gonna be a long song, but it'll be a good ride.
Your favorite food is what?
My parents cooking. My dad just opened a restaurant in Houston. He serves Caribbean food.
Plug it. Plug it.
It's Lucian's Caribbean Restaurant in Houston, Texas. It's on Clear Lake City Boulevard, and it is the best food you will ever have. The best Caribbean food in Houston for sure. Yeah, take a taste because you will not regret it.
Okay, so if I show up there, what should I order?
I would order the brown stew chicken because that's what I get every time. And I mean, but there's also the jerk chicken that's kind of the specialty of the house. But I don't know, brown stew chicken. It's got a chokehold on me ever since I was like 5, so I have to order it like every time.
I like Caribbean jerk chicken a lot. I've never had that type that you're discussing, but I'm always down to eat anything at least once to try it. I mean, I just went to the store the other day, and as disgusting as this sounds, there is now at like local Walmarts macaroni and cheese ice cream and pizza ice cream. And the thought of it makes me want to vomit. But then there's a part of me that's like, if someone else buys this, I will at least try a bite. Like, I'm not spending my money on it, but I'll try it. I'll try it.
Yeah. Oh, no, I will not. You can keep your macaroni and cheese ice cream.
Yeah, it's rough. It's rough. If you were to headline WrestleMania, who would you want to face in the main event?
Rhea Ripley. I just feel like our size difference, she could do so much to, like, we could just make it such an amazing match just because of the size difference. Also, like, there was, like, her basing skills have to be amazing. She would just be able to throw me everywhere. I can see the possibilities now.
If you were to get the opportunity to have someone tutor you and teach you for the next year that's currently a pro wrestler, who would you want to be your mentor over top of you?
Dolph Ziggler. I feel like not a lot of people would say him, but if you look at his career and you look at the matches he has, he is an amazing wrestler, and I just want to learn everything that he would have to offer.
What did you think about him going to NXT and winning the NXT championship?
I'm happy for him just because I feel like he was kind of getting a little bit lost in the main roster, and now he's got like a refresher, and he's at the forefront of a lot of people's minds again.
Yeah, I've said it for a while. If you don't have something for somebody on the main roster, then why not throw them down to NXT for a while and get them in a feud? I thought before they let Jeff Hardy go and they were just squandering him, I was like, why don't you put Jeff Hardy in NXT for about a 6-month period? Have him feud with somebody, elevate, because I think that's what the biggest problem in pro wrestling is. They're so scared to elevate people unless it's somebody that they want elevated.
Yeah, that is, I mean, when you get into pro wrestling, you have to also think about the writing and the decisions of the company. But at the same time, I don't own a multi-million-dollar company, so I'm very, very, very new to this business in general. So my takes are very, very normative. I just love wrestling. I watch Dolph Ziggler and I'm like, hey, he's on NXT now. I don't think about all of the different aspects of the politics behind closed doors and everything like that. But I would have to say I agree. I feel like the elevation of new talent is a really important part of not only bigger promotions but indie promotions as well. Just because I feel like in wrestling it's kind of become a tradition to kind of stick to the same thing for a very, very long time. And we're starting to just now kind of see how fast talent can move. And I feel like that tradition can spread to the old traditions. This new tradition of fast-paced changing in terms of rotating talent can spread to some of the older talents.
Awesome. before I let you go, tell everyone where they can find you on social media, or if you have any merchandise or anything you'd like to plug, here's your shot.
Yeah, so if you see me at a show, I have MJ Santana shirts. I drew this myself. And then I am on mj.santana.wrestling on Instagram and Facebook.
Awesome. For everyone out there, give her a follow, buy some merchandise, do whatever you can. If you see her out at the show, make sure you're supporting her. Thank you so much, MJ, for joining on here with us. I greatly appreciate it.
Thank you.
For everyone out there, make sure you're doing what you need to do. Stay safe, follow restrictions, whatever you need to do so wrestling does not get canceled wherever it is. I don't care. I mean, if they tell you to put on a mask, put on a mask. We need wrestling to continue. I need it in my life as a vacation from normal life. MJ needs it from a vacation from school. It's one of those things, right? So make sure you're doing what you need to do. Hopefully everyone out there is staying safe. Thank you for all the support that you've given me and Tom. Make sure you're hitting the subscribe button. And if you're traveling to and from and you need a good read, pick up a copy of my books, Independent Road to Wrestler's Journey and Loving Casey Nelson at Barnes & Nobles. I appreciate all the support. Thank you all, and we'll see y'all next week.